Elizabeth Taylor. Tell me, darling, what's she got? What do you think made the tin roof so hot?
The 1970s didn't just change what beauty looked like, it changed what beauty was allowed to be. These are the 20 women who defined that decade not just with their looks, but with what those looks let them get away with, and what those looks eventually cost them. Here they are, then and now. Julie Kavner. Julie Deborah Kavner, born September 7th, 1950 in Los Angeles to a Jewish family of modest means. She was never cast for her looks, and that was exactly her power. A round, warm, deeply expressive face that the camera loved because it was real. She broke through as Brenda Morgenstern on Rhoda in 1974, winning an Emmy in 1978, playing the kind of woman network television rarely centered. Plain-spoken, funny, insecure in a way that felt lived in. Never married publicly, and in 1987 became the voice of Marge Simpson, a role she still holds in 2026 at age 75. She refuses interviews, has never shown her face recording the part, and considers privacy a non-negotiable condition of her work. The least visible famous voice in television history, Carol Burnett. Carol Creighton Burnett, born April 26, 1933 in San Antonio, Texas, raised in near poverty by her grandmother in a one-room apartment in Hollywood. What stopped people wasn't conventional beauty, but a face built for everything. Rubber band expressive, enormous eyes that could do tragedy and slapstick in the same breath. She'd been a Broadway and variety star since the early 1960s, but the 1970s belonged to the Carol Burnett Show, which ran from 1967 to 1978 and won 25 Emmys. She set the template for a woman being the funniest person in the room and still being beautiful. Married 3 times, most notably to Joe Hamilton. Endured the devastating loss of her daughter Carrie to lung cancer in 2002. As of 2026, she's 92, still making appearances, and still the gold standard for women in comedy who never had to choose between funny and gorgeous. Jessica Harper. Jessica Harper, born October 10th, 1949 in Chicago. Pale, dark-haired, wide-eyed in a way that seemed not innocent, but knowing. She was a theater actress who stumbled into cult immortality through Dario Argento's Suspiria in 1977, where her terrified face became the visual anchor of one of horror's most beautiful nightmares. She followed it with Phantom of the Paradise, Stardust Memories for Woody Allen, and Pennies from Heaven. The industry treated her as a face for genre films, never giving her the mainstream push her talent warranted. She married producer Tom Rothman, raised a family, published children's books, and returned briefly for Suspiria's 2018 remake. In 2026, at 76, she lives privately, a cult icon who never needed the mainstream to matter. Beverly D'Angelo. Beverly Heather D'Angelo, born November 15th, 1951 in Columbus, Ohio, Italian-American on her father's side. A face that mixed Catholic girl softness with rock and roll sharpness. Big eyes, full lips, and energy that read as both trustworthy and slightly reckless. She trained as a singer and animator before breaking into film with her portrayal of Patsy Cline in Coal Miner's Daughter in 1980 and country singer roles throughout the late 1970s. But it was as Ellen Griswold opposite Chevy Chase in National Lampoon's Vacation in 1983 that cemented her as the wife America's husbands couldn't stop watching. She had twins with Al Pacino in 2001 after a relationship that never formalized into marriage. As of 2026, she's 74, still acting, most recently recurring on Shooter and various indie films, aging on her own terms with no apologies. Stephanie Powers. Stephanie Zofia Paul, born November 2nd, 1942 in Hollywood to a Polish-American family. A classic brunette beauty, high cheekbones, athletic build, and a gaze that mixed intelligence with glamour, she was groomed by Columbia Pictures at 15. She worked steadily through the 1960s in westerns and spy shows, but the 1970s defined her publicly through her relationship with William Holden, the Golden Age star 24 years her senior. Their romance lasted nearly a decade. When Holden died alone in 1981, it was Stephanie who channeled grief into purpose, co-founding the William Holden Wildlife Foundation in Kenya. She starred in Heart to Heart from 1979 to 1984 with Robert Wagner. Married twice, no children. At 83 in 2026, she lives between Los Angeles and Kenya. Still involved in conservation, still carrying Holden's legacy. Carol Baker. Born Karolina Piekarski, May 28, 1931 in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Polish-Irish working class. A blonde with a baby doll face that masked genuine dramatic range, she stopped the world in Baby Doll for Elia Kazan in 1956, sucking her thumb in a crib at 25 and earning an Oscar nomination. By the 1970s, the studios had discarded her. She fled to Italy, surviving on giallo horror films and exploitation pictures, doing nude scenes that few Hollywood actresses would touch. She called it survival. Married 3 times, including to director Jack Garfein, a Holocaust survivor, she returned to American cinema for Ironweed, alongside Nicholson and Streep in 1987, and later Kindergarten Cop. Now 94 in 2026, retired in New York, one of the last survivors of 1950s Hollywood. She outlasted every system that tried to use her up. Tuesday Weld. Born Susan Kerr Weld, August 27, 1943, in New York City. Blonde, fragile, with a face that looked like it already knew too much. She was modeling at 3 after her father died, had a nervous breakdown at 9, attempted suicide at 12. By the 1970s, she was the beautiful wreck Hollywood kept casting in roles about beautiful wrecks. Looking for Mr. Goodbar, which earned her an Oscar nomination, and Play It As It Lays from the Joan Didion novel. Romanced by Al Pacino, married to Dudley Moore, and later Pinchas Zuckerman. She turned down Bonnie and Clyde, Lolita, and True Grit. She said she didn't need to play Lolita because she was Lolita. At 82 in 2026, she lives privately in the Hollywood Hills. One of the great what-if careers in cinema. Liv Ullmann. Liv Johanna Ullmann, born December 16, 1938, in Tokyo to Norwegian parents. A face of almost sculptural Nordic stillness. Enormous eyes that held emotions other actresses needed dialogue to convey. She was Ingmar Bergman's muse and lover through the late 1960s and into the 1970s, starring in Persona, Cries and Whispers, Scenes from a Marriage, and Face to Face, which earned her one of 2 Oscar nominations. They had a daughter, Lynn, but never married. The beauty she represented was intellectual, European, unsmiling, the opposite of Hollywood gloss. She transitioned to directing in the 1990s and became a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador. At 87 in 2026, she lives in Norway. She once said that aging was about finally owning a face that matches who you are inside. Barbara Hershey. Born Barbara Lynn Herzstein, February 5, 1948, in Hollywood to a Jewish family. Dark-haired, olive-skinned, with a face that shifted between ethereal and earthy depending on the light. She was a working actress by 17. In the 1970s, she changed her last name to Seagull after a bird died on set, lived communally, had a son with David Carradine without marrying him, and became Hollywood's emblem of hippie-era freedom and excess. She was dismissed as a flake, then she reinvented herself. By the 1980s, she delivered devastating work in Hannah and Her Sisters, The Last Temptation of Christ, and won consecutive Best Actress prizes at Cannes. Her face, once considered too unconventional, became timeless. At 78 in 2026, she works selectively, lives in Los Angeles, and has never had cosmetic surgery, a choice she considers political. Jodie Foster. Alicia Christian Foster, born November 19, 1962, in Los Angeles. She was 12 when Taxi Driver made her the most controversial face in American cinema, a child playing a prostitute with an intelligence behind her eyes that disturbed audiences because it felt entirely real. Blonde, androgynous, fiercely self-contained, she represented a beauty that was brainy and unreachable. She was a Coppertone kid, a Disney child actress, a Yale graduate, and a 2-time Oscar winner before she turned 35. The industry tried to reduce her to a face. She refused every time. She came out publicly in 2013, directed several features, and has remained one of the most private public figures in Hollywood. At 63 in 2026, she's still acting, most recently in True Detective Night Country. She turned beauty into armor and then put it away. Meryl Streep. Mary Louise Streep, born June 22, 1949, in Summit, New Jersey, to a pharmaceutical executive and a commercial artist. It wasn't classical beauty that stopped people. It was the way she inhabited a face so completely that you forgot what she actually looked like. She arrived in the late 1970s like a verdict. The Deer Hunter, Kramer vs. Kramer, Manhattan, all between 1978 and 1979. She won the Oscar for Kramer. Married sculptor Don Gummer in 1978, 6 weeks after the death of her great love, John Cazale. 4 children, 21 Oscar nominations, the most in history. She never set trends in fashion. She set them in what a woman's face was allowed to do on screen, everything. At 76 in 2026, she's still working, separated from Gummer since 2023, and remains the permanent answer to whether beauty and talent are the same question. Brooke Shields. Brooke Krista Shields, born May 31st, 1965 in New York City to socialite Terry Shields, who managed and monetized her daughter's beauty from infancy. She was modeling for Ivory Soap at 11 months. By 14, she starred in Pretty Baby as a child prostitute in a New Orleans brothel. Then in Blue Lagoon at 15, her body becoming public property before she was old enough to drive. She was the most photographed face in America by 1980. Dark eyebrows, blue eyes, a perfection so symmetrical it felt artificial. The Calvin Klein jeans campaign made her a global commodity. She studied at Princeton, married Andre Agassi, then Chris Hinchey, battled postpartum depression publicly. At 60 in 2026, she's an author, businesswoman, and one of the most vocal critics of the industry that used her childhood for profit. Catherine Ross. Catherine Juliette Ross, born January 29th, 1940 in Hollywood. She was the face of the late 1960s hangover, the Woodstock generation's dream girl. Natural, sun-warmed, effortlessly beautiful, with brown hair and wide-set eyes that held quiet intelligence. The Graduate and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid made her inescapable between 1967 and 1969. She won a BAFTA, was nominated for an Oscar, and then watched the 1970s slowly discard her. The Stepford Wives in 1975 became her last great 70s role. Bitterly ironic for a woman watching herself be replaced by Hollywood's next model. Married 5 times, the last to Sam Elliott in 1984, which endured. One daughter, she wrote children's books, lived quietly on a ranch. At 86 in 2026, she's retired in Malibu, rarely photographed, exactly the way she wants it. Joan Collins. Joan Henrietta Collins, born May 23rd, 1933 in Paddington, London, to a theatrical agent father and a dance teacher mother. Classic English rose crossed with something dangerous. Dark hair, green eyes, and a jawline that could cut glass. RADA trained by 17, a contract player for Rank and then Fox by 20. The 1970s saw her grinding through B-movies and exploitation pictures. Tales from the Crypt, Empire of the Ants, The Stud, and The Bitch, based on Sister Jackie's novels. She was considered finished. Then Dynasty made her Alexis Carrington in 1981, and she became the most glamorous woman on American television at 48. Married 5 times, most recently to Percy Gibson, 31 years her junior, she was made a dame in 2015. At 92 in 2026, she lives in London and Saint-Tropez. Still immaculate, still proving that beauty is a decision you make every morning. Diane Keaton. Diane Hall, born January 5th, 1946 in Los Angeles, to a Methodist engineer and a homemaker. She redefined beauty in the 1970s by dressing like she'd raided a man's closet. Turtlenecks, vests, oversized trousers, a hat. The face underneath was angular, nervous, handsome rather than pretty, and utterly magnetic. She was Woody Allen's muse and real-life partner, and Annie Hall in 1977 won her the Oscar and launched a fashion revolution women are still copying. The Godfather films gave her dramatic credibility. Looking for Mr. Goodbar gave her danger. She never married, adopted 2 children in her 50s, became a real estate developer, photographer, and architectural preservationist. At 80 in 2026, she still dresses like no one else and remains proof that style is what happens when beauty stops trying to please. Ali MacGraw. Elizabeth Alice MacGraw, born April 1st, 1939 in Pound Ridge, New York, to artists. Dark hair parted in the center, high cheekbones, barely any makeup, a face that looked like it had never tried to be beautiful and was devastating for exactly that reason. She was a Harper's Bazaar assistant and Vogue model before Goodbye Columbus in 1969 made her a star overnight at 30. Love Story in 1970 made her the most famous woman in America. Then she married Steve McQueen, walked away from her career at his insistence, and lost years to his control and her own alcohol dependency. She later said McQueen was the love of her life and the worst thing that ever happened to her career. She moved to New Mexico, practiced yoga, advocated for animal rights. She died on January 18th, 2024 at age 84 in her home in New Mexico. Jaclyn Smith. Jaclyn Ellen Smith, born October 26, 1945 in Houston, Texas, to a dentist father of Russian Jewish heritage. A face that was technically perfect, symmetrical, warm, unthreatening. The kind of beauty that sold products because it made women feel invited rather than excluded. She studied ballet, modeled for Breck Shampoo, and was the only original Charlie's Angel who stayed all 5 seasons from 1976 to 1981. She appeared in all 115 episodes. Critics dismissed the show. Audiences made it a phenomenon. She was the constant. After the show, she launched a Kmart clothing line that ran for decades, becoming one of the first celebrity brand entrepreneurs. Married 4 times, 2 children. Survived breast cancer in 2002. At 80 in 2026, she lives in Houston and Los Angeles, still overseeing her business lines. The angel who became a mogul. Catherine Deneuve. Catherine Fabienne d'Orléac, born October 22, 1943 in Paris to actors. The most beautiful face in European cinema and possibly anywhere else. Ice blonde, mathematically proportioned, with a reserve that made men project anything they wanted onto her stillness. Discovered at 13, a star by 21 after The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. By the 1970s, she was Luis Buñuel's muse in Belle de Jour and Tristana, embodying a sexuality that was elegant, disturbing, and entirely self-possessed. She became the face of Chanel No. 5 and the official model for Marianne, the symbol of France itself. Had children by Roger Vadim and Marcello Mastroianni, married only once, briefly. She survived a stroke in 2019 and made a full recovery. At 82 in 2026, she lives in Paris, still acts occasionally, and once said that beauty without strangeness is just decoration. Faye Dunaway. Dorothy Faye Dunaway, born January 14, 1941 in Bascom, Florida, daughter of a career Army officer. A face of angles, cheekbones that cast shadows, eyes that could freeze a room. She arrived in Bonnie and Clyde in 1967, and by the 1970s was delivering 3 of the decade's greatest performances. Chinatown in 1974, 3 Days of the Condor in 1975, and Network in 1976, which won her the Oscar. She represented a beauty that was dangerous, intelligent, and not asking permission. She was photographed beside the pool at the Beverly Hills Hotel the morning after her Oscar win, and that single image defined a decade. Married 3 times, including to Peter Wolf and Terry O'Neill, adopted a son. The career after the 1970s was brutal. Mommy Dearest in 1981 turned her into a punchline she spent decades trying to outrun. At 85 in 2026, she lives reclusive in New York. A documentary on her life premiered at Cannes in 2024. She remains the face that proved beauty and ferocity were never opposite. Julie Christie. Julie Frances Christie, born April 14, 1940 in Shabua, Assam, British India, to a tea plantation owner. A beauty so specific to the era that looking at her face is like looking at the 1970s itself. No makeup, tangled blonde hair, a skeptical mouth, eyes that dared you. She won the Oscar at 24 for Darling and then became the romantic ideal for an entire counterculture. Lara in Dr. Zhivago, the unknowable woman in McCabe and Mrs. Miller, the grief-haunted mother in Don't Look Now. Warren Beatty loved her. She left Hollywood because she didn't trust it. She moved to a farm in Wales, joined anti-nuclear campaigns, and essentially rejected fame at the height of her power. She returned for Afterglow and Away From Her, earning another Oscar nomination at 66. At 85 in 2026, she lives on her Welsh farm, no social media, no interviews. The most beautiful woman of the 1970s who decided that being seen was overrated. 20 faces, 20 stories. Some survived the decade, some were consumed by it. Of the 20 women on this list, 18 are still alive in 2026. Ally McGraw passed in 2024. The rest carry on in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, proof that beauty was never the whole story, just the door it opened and the price it charged for walking through. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe so you never miss out on more history documentaries.